Welcome to the Game Plan Coaching Podcast. Today I'm joined by Nicky Harverson, a brilliant child-first coach who puts play, joy and curiosity at the centre of learning. Nicky leads at Cheltenham Town Wheelers, helping young riders build confidence and connection through cycling. We talk about stepping back so children can step forward, meeting them where they are, and her sole approach, silently observing, understanding and learning. It's practical, playful, and a powerful reminder to coach the child, not the drill. Here's Nicky Harverson. Nicky, imagine we have a montage of your coaching journey.
Okay.
What is the theme tune that's playing in the background and why?
My goodness. My initial one was it's Jaws. Waiting for the anticipation of something to actually happen. But actually, it's probably a little bit more Eliza Doolittle, which is a meander through some very fun, jaunty music that takes me into different places every time I listen to it.
Brilliant. Nicky, thanks for joining us on the podcast today. Would you tell us a bit about your background and your journey through coaching?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a cycling coach and I started out probably about, I keep saying 10 years ago, but it's probably longer than that. It just 10 seems like that natural thing to say, but it's definitely now longer than 10 years. And I started out in the usual way. I really enjoy riding my bike. I wanted to do something to give back. And so I started, leading rides and, chatting to people about, getting involved in a club. And I had some cones and some kids in a playground. And that's where I started. And I knew nothing. And as I kind of progressed, I helped set up a club. It was a youth club. We had, obviously youth riders coming in age 6 to 14 at the time. And over the 10 years, we've just expanded and grown. And I've become not just one of the coaches that come along. I've gone through the education pathway. I've actually now chair the club. We have 120 riders every Saturday. We've got 10 adult coaches, 10 to 12 youth coaches, so all under 18, and honestly an army of volunteers that come and help sort of set up and everything in the background. So yeah, and I've had waves of my coaching has been very specific about the coaching and the riding itself, and that's been great. But then there are moments when obviously, as volunteers, we sit back and have to do all of the other stuff, the admin.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my coaching journey. But throughout that, I've also started to do different work. And I've become a coach educator and a coach developer as part of that. And I'm navigating that space now with British Cycling, which has been really enjoyable and a real learning experience. And it's helped me become that better coach, trying to understand how to help coaches has enabled me to become a kind of a much better coach as well, I feel.
That's great. And it's brilliant that you're taking that step into supporting others and sharing lots of your experiences. From the work you do working with grassroots coaches, what do you think is their biggest point of pain?
It's getting to the park on a Saturday without everything else getting in the way. They're all volunteers. We're all volunteers in this space particularly. And, we now have to be more structured. We've got loads of kids coming. So I kind of gone, can we put the plans in the WhatsApp group by Wednesday? So we can then tell the young leaders what they're doing by Thursday. We can then set their tent out, and all of that takes so much time and energy that actually we sometimes forget that it's about the kids on the park on a Saturday afternoon. That's my biggest problem when we come to grassroots coaching, is the amount of effort and energy that we put in and the expectation that actually we're there for an hour. We're not. That's what is visible. It's all the stuff that happens before and after and in between that actually makes this kind of journey hard. And I know we were just chatting beforehand, it's how do we as grassroots coaches keep up with the different ways of being able to coach, or the different nuances of how to do things with whatever our young people are learning, whether it's football or rugby or dance, or for me cycling, it's how do you keep up with what they want, what they go and watch, so that we can then keep them engaged and entertained and progressing.
It's super hard, isn't it, when you're a volunteer coach and it's not the thing you think about and do all the time, yet you're trying to create the best experience for the kids who are there, but you've got limited resources to call on, limited time. If you were to think back to a younger version of your coaching self, what do you wish you'd known then that you know now?
That's a great question. There are a couple of things around planning, the quick kind of things that I do now around thinking about, how do I observe a rider on one session and then go away and think about how can I help progress that next week for everybody, not just one person. Those little things that I probably do now so naturally and normally. I wish I'd kind of cottoned on to that earlier. And the other thing is the amount I used to talk in a session to the amount I talk now. and when I mean talk, I talk a lot still, but the conversations are richer with the riders that I have, no matter what age they are. The conversations are now richer. Before it was, how much can I get out of my mouth whilst I have them in front of me before they go riding so that they know exactly what they've got to do. Now it doesn't matter.
A coaching friend of mine once said that sometimes making no intervention is an intervention in itself. And like you, I came to that realization that actually I feel like I'm just trying to fill the space by saying a lot, and actually by remaining quieter for longer, you let the children have more opportunity to solve the problems themselves. I was taking the under-12s last night, actually, and we were playing a game against another team, and their coaches were quite vocal from the side of the pitch. Lots of instructions, all coming from a good place, but they were feeding a lot of information into the players. And I thought, I need to say something to our players about the difference, because they might look at me not saying much and think, well, he doesn't really care, or he's not helping us. I tried to make this point to say, well, the less I say, the more you learn and the more opportunity you have to figure things out for yourself. And that's probably better for the long run. In your environment, is it culturally normal that the coach would give lots of information a lot of the time? And if you're not doing that...
7 coaching points.
Yeah, of course.
And this is what I have to tell them to do in order to be able to do the thing that they're doing.
How do you go about being a bit different then? Like if you're taking a different approach, that could be perceived as quite bold or risky.
Or that you're not doing anything at all.
Well, yeah.
That's the risk. And I think when you said actually, not doing anything is an intervention in itself, you're right. Actually, by just simply watching what's happening and then talking to those that want your input to start with is actually a really great place for me to start. But yeah, I think other coaches have noticed that and they do it, and then they go, yeah, how do I not start the conversation with, and these are the 5 things that I have to do? Or, surely they need to know what to do, and I need to tell them because there's a correct way of doing that skill. And the conversations that I have to have there is like, well, they don't know the correct way, but they'll have a go, and then you know where you can start working with them from their starting point, because until you watch them you don't know what their starting point is. So if it's a technical still, like a wheelie or a bunny hop or something like that, it's a technical still. There are components that need to happen. There are movement patterns that a rider needs to do in order to be able to do that. But if I haven't watched someone try it, how will I know where to start with them?
So when you're watching, and I suppose in cycling and different tricks, or I'd say moves on a bike, that I guess there's an element of risk involved, that if someone gets it wrong at some point, they might hurt themselves. So what are you trading off in your head about, like, this is a good time to stand back and let them play and maybe fall off, but then this is the appropriate time to step in and offer something?
So I guess it does come from knowing what I'm seeing, absolutely. And when you're talking about a skill or a trick or something like that, actually if you've got a young person in front of you who's never got their wheels off the ground before, the first time they do it, they're not going to do it, because they just don't have the physical ability to do that. The bike's too heavy, they're not in the right position, so it won't work. But you will see what movement patterns they have, so that you can then go, right, okay, we need to be getting them doing a bit more weight through here, straighter arms. So you'll know what those things are that they need to do. But then it's about how you then gently take them through that process their way, rather than you doing it your way, because it's not going to be a linear process. I'm not going to go and put them on a jump and go, yeah, go jump that, because that's like, they can't do that. They won't they will hurt themselves. But if you're doing it on a flat piece of ground with the riders who've never done this before, they're not going to be able to jump their bike. They're not going to get the wheel off. They might just go up and down on their saddle a bit, and that's about it. The rest then comes from how you help them to graduate to that. Now, when they can do the movement and then you transition across into something that is a bit more dangerous, like going over a jump or, trying to do something, that's the point at which you start to go, right, now we need to have a little bit more slower input and a little bit more practical sort of conversations around how you might do something. But again, they'll have learned so much before you get to that point of them going down that route. So you tend to feel comfortable as a coach in doing that, I think. I'm hoping I'm explaining that well enough.
You are completely. The thing that comes up in my mind is, but part of the way that you do your work isn't just helping them learn the skill that they're working on, but you're also developing some learning to learn skills as well.
Yeah.
So they become more resourceful as somebody on the bike, and then they can solve more problems better in the future.
Becoming the rider that can get the wheels off the ground. That's the bit that's really important. The mechanics of it is movement pattern. But they also have to have the headspace to know that they feel comfortable doing that. And that's the real power for you as the coach, I think. That's your gift around how you help them shape that practice to get there.
So you've said a few things that I think people listening to this might think, hang on a minute, what does that mean? Or how do I apply this in my context? So you said earlier, to help them learn the skill in their way. And you just made a point about it, how the individual accomplishes it. It's about their development, their journey. Now, we first met in a coffee shop in Leeds when you did some fabulous drawings and we were part of a Play Their Way workshop. I wonder if you could just dig into a little bit more about that individualization and the voice and the choice of the young person that you're working with.
And it's essential, I think, when you are helping them to become the person who can, ... If you don't know who they are as a person, you're not going to help them progress as a rider or in whatever sport that you're talking about. They will have goals and aspirations that are way beyond their current capability. And as a coach, you have to know, how are you going to help fill that gap? And they might not be able to do the big gap jumps. All my young riders, age 6 up, I want to jump a gap. Well, a gap is massive. They're not going to do that probably till they're, I don't know. Some kids do it younger, but they're going to be about 10 or 12 before they actually get to do that. So how do I become the coach that enables them to go, yeah, you can realize that dream? We got to start here though, where you're at. And it's listening to that and not dismissing the fact that they are not going to jump that gap jump until they're in another few years' time. So where do you go? How do you find the energy? And it's from their voice and their choice. So you allow them to play. You allow them to experience getting the wheels off the ground, that exhilaration of doing it for themselves, even if it's just by a couple of centimetres. They'll be coming back from that session going, wow, did you see me do that? It's tiny what they've achieved in terms of what their goal is, but it's massive because it's what they wanted to do by the end of that session. And for them, it's really important. And it's celebrating that small little win for them each and every time they come. Giving them that voice and hearing what their goals are and why they want to do it helps you then challenge them as a rider. And you just keep that going every time you speak to them. And keeping it playful in those sessions and engaging, and not just all about, right, well, we need to make sure that your arms are always this and your feet are always that and your head is always that, and correcting. It's more around enabling and keep playing and things will happen. And that's that voice and choice, I think, for me.
Love that. So, Nicky, in, the app, What 3 Words?
Yeah.
Just thought this as you were talking. There was something that you said that sparked this. If you were to describe your location at the moment as a coach in 3 words, what would it be?
Goodness, right. Playful, awareness, challenge.
Go on, tell us a tiny bit more.
So playful came up first because I always want to make sure that whoever I'm working with is enjoying what they're doing. And that enjoyment comes, it's not about, I've always got to make it fun. It's about, how do I make this enjoyable? It could be something that's actually quite hard for them to do, but we've got to have a rapport and some enjoyment in this, even though it's a struggle. So that's really important. So playful is really important. I want to be playful too. I want to be able to explore things with the rider that may or may not work. And I want them to know that that's okay. And I want them to be playful because they'll find different ways of doing something that I wouldn't have even thought about because I can't do it myself on a bike. The next one is awareness. I always try and ground myself in seeing as much of the person that I am coaching or the group that I am coaching as I can. And that awareness means that I have to have little spidey senses, I guess, going. And it's not just on the thing that's happening, the technique, it's also around the environment that we're practicing in and we're coaching in. And that comes in, I guess, with the learning. It's like, what am I seeing? What am I learning? How am I adapting? And how's that awareness really helping me to dive into that? And then when it comes to challenge, I want to be challenged myself as a coach. I want to make sure that every time I go to the park, the riders or the coaches I'm working with challenge me to be better. Because if I'm not being challenged, I'm not being the best I can be. And if I don't go home more curious about how I could do things, then I'll stagnate and I'll get stuck.
Yeah, fantastic. We had a guest
I love that. Thank you.
We had a guest on, and I'm going to start that as a feature in this podcast. What 3 words? Where's your location as a coach? I knew something creative would come out of us talking today. Richard Cheetham was a guest on another episode, and the thing he added into our game plan was play and free play and the value of that. Obviously, all the science backs it up. It's how we learn as human beings. It's something that actually, that if you can introduce an element of play or playfulness with what you do and how you do it, the possibilities which could emerge from there are massive, and it might just require you as a coach to let go of some stuff.
100%. I love the work that Richard does. I never fail to learn something new from him.
Nicky, in every episode of our podcast, we invite our guests to add something to the game plan. So the game plan is something we're building, which is this shared playbook of stories, ideas, and lessons that any coach could draw from. So over to you. What's the story or idea or the thing that you're going to add to our game plan?
I'm going to add soul. So for me, soul is a philosophy. For me, it's a way of being as a coach, and you've probably got a little bit from the what 3 words, but soul is silently observing, understanding, and learning. And I heard this first from, his title is Director of Play, Ben Norris at Play Gloucestershire. He and I have had loads of conversations over the years in various different guises of work, and he spoke about soul. And it does come from that play theory as well. But for me, it's about how do I, as a coach, shut up and listen. That's the first bit. That's silently. The observing bit is, what am I seeing? Where am I right now? Am I in the right place? Am I looking at the right things? Am I really aware of what is going on? And that can be a group or an individual. And then the understanding kicks in. So for me, it's like the first thing I need to do when I bring the riders in is ask a question. Like, it could be a very specific question to one rider, or it could be a group question. In order for me to understand better, I need to ask a good question. And I'm really trying to tie myself into a question that is 5 words or less. So I'm able to kind of really focus in on, right, what is it that I really want to know from these riders that I'm coaching right now? And then the learning piece is then what happens next? How does that create a sense of progression or regression? It could be regression as well. I'm quite open to going, actually, no, we're not getting this, so we want to go back. Okay, let's go back. So yeah, silently observing, understanding, and learning is a kind of philosophy that I like to share with as many people as I can, because I think it's great.
It feels like that approach is quite cyclical as well, from the learning piece and feeds straight back into like watching again and stepping back.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is. I think the learning for me is, it's not just about what they're learning. It's how am I learning from my riders too. Learning to learn, like you said earlier, is a really important piece. And that isn't just them as riders, it's me as the coach. How am I learning to learn alongside them? And different groups will afford that in different ways.
There's I came across a research paper not so long ago by somebody called Fabianotte, who has a big background in ecological dynamics and is a goalkeeper coach. And his paper was about how coach learning and athlete learning is intertwined. So you wouldn't be doing your job as effectively as you could as a coach if you weren't learning in the process of coaching, because everything that happens in front of you should shape what you're reflecting on and then what you develop and how you work next. About openness and, I guess, flexibility, adaptability as a coach, to be able to say, I don't know everything, and every session I will evolve based on what's in front of me.
Yeah. I'm going to have to go dig that out.
So if you step back, it was just this light bulb moment of common sense. Of course, the learning of the players in front of me and my own development as a coach are not divorced from each other. They're part of the same thing. Yeah. You mentioned asking questions and understanding better. Thinking really practically, in the last few weeks when you've been working with riders, have you stumbled across or formulated a question that's been really powerful or had that domino effect?
That's an interesting one, actually, because it's not one question. Actually, what I've noticed, it's the question I didn't think I was going to ask that's been the best one. And it's the one that's formulated just because it's come to me in the moment. And I don't know whether that's because I've been practicing asking questions better, that now I feel more comfortable that actually it's coming out. But it is the less words I use, the better. And it's the ones that come from what I've seen in the moment that make the difference. And and I need to practice. I need to think about that more, I think, actually, and go, is there one question? But yeah,
it's a great point. And I've thought many times about how to position a question so it doesn't feel threatening, or it's not one of those funneled questions where you're just trying to guess the word in Tom's head. And I've seen it a few times, and I'm very, very guilty of it myself, where you're just looking for one answer, and that doesn't really feel like a question. It's just a command in disguise.
The better ones are framed with what. So, what's going on in that bit there, that space for you? But what's going on is a really simple question. You might need to direct what you mean, but if you ask what's going on, they can come up with anything. And that's the beauty of it. What did you notice around, that part of the course or with that skill? So you might direct them a little bit, but I think the what questions kind of evoke a bit more kind of like curiosity. The why questions are much harder because have I got it wrong? So I would only go to why once I'd got them through the what, and then I would try and avoid why if I could use how.
I see your point. Another thing that's worked for me, actually, and I tried this when I was working with older athletes, was trying to change the word you to we. And maybe this links back to what you were saying earlier around like the coach is learning alongside the player or the rider. So I was working with a player and we were trying to help her be better at moving back towards her defensive line to receive the ball to play forwards. And I think one way to ask a question would be, what would you do differently next time? Another way to ask it could be, well, how can we solve the problem of you receiving the ball from the defenders?
Yeah.
And I think positioning a question in a way that there isn't necessarily one right answer, and it also shows it's a collaborative effort between the coach and the coachee, helps maybe generate stuff that neither of us would imagine on our own.
Yeah, that's just taken me to something. I'm preparing to run an action learning set on Thursday evening with a group of coaches, and I was trying to just go through it myself. How do I set this up? And part of that is around the questions that we ask. And I wrote down this morning, be curious, not clever. And that's the question. You want to be curious with your question, not clever about it. And I really, I've been rumbling with that actually all morning. And when you just said it, I was like, yeah, that's it. That's what I mean.
I've done some work in the past with a fabulous person. You might know this person, Professor Stephen Rolnick. And Stephen has a brilliant book called Coaching Athletes to Be Their Best. He's a positive psychologist. He's co-developed something called motivational interviewing, which is a really co-constructed way of asking questions and helping people look within themselves. Steve talks a lot about coaching having too many deficit detectives and not enough treasure hunters. But when I've worked with Steve, when he's asked me questions, he's framed it to say, I'm genuinely not trying to be clever here. I'm just really want to understand the deeper truth. And even framing it like that, I think, is quite freeing for the person on the receiving end, because it probably creates the conditions for better conversation and a bit more trust.
And the trust is really the right word there, isn't it? When you're working with a group, particularly young people, you have to build that trust and that rapport quite quickly. And if they think that you're just going to fire questions at them, that won't build quickly. It has to be, so that has to be that right question. And you're right, that, and they're not clever, but building a deeper trust is a really powerful way of thinking about the way that we use questions as coaches.
I knew this would happen when we spoke, Nicky, that we would go off in lots of different directions. But what's front and center in my mind at the moment is that asking helpful questions can be a brilliant tool for coaches to be able to add a level of richness to the way that they coach. Just telling is important sometimes. Of course it is. We need to. But if we can be really intentional and imaginative with the way that we design and ask questions, then we could end up at the end of our coaching session in a totally different place to where we began.
Definitely.
So, Nicky, you've added soul into our game plan. Thank you. That's awesome. So, to finish off, and for the final part of our conversation, we like to end every podcast with something practical and powerful, a takeaway that could change the game for a coach. So, have you got a piece of game-changing advice for coaches? Maybe they could go and apply it straight away. They could tweak it to suit their context, or maybe for now reflect on in their own coaching.
Okay. So when you asked this question beforehand, I really had to think about this, and I wondered what's been my game changer. And there are two things for me, but they both come down to recording myself coaching and hearing myself back, that playback of what I say when I'm on the park. And more importantly, it isn't just what I say, it's how I say it, whether that's pitch, volume, references. But what that's led me to is actually recording a voice note for my sessions for my other coaches, so they know what's in my head when I go to the park and I'm co-coaching. But also, I listen to that back myself several times so that I know what the intonation of my voice is telling me about the way I want to be as a coach. And the recording bit is the important part. And it's not because I don't like writing things down, but actually when I hear myself back, I can see how energetic, enthusiastic, fed up, disillusioned I might be when I'm recording myself and when I hear myself back. And so I would encourage any coach to record themselves. And it could be as simple as recording your session so you know what energy you want to evoke before you go. That's a really good starter because it's a really nice, safe space to be in to start with if you're not used to hearing yourself. But then do progress to putting yourself, recording yourself when you coach and then hearing yourself back and then working on those little things that say, oh, okay, so I say that a lot. Wow, my voice is really high pitched at that point. What am I trying to get across? And where was that in the session? And I'm like, okay, I was getting really excited at that point. How do I learn from that? And it's not whether I have to change it. It's what am I learning about my coaching that will help me to improve who I'm becoming as a coach later on.
I'm really curious in a few things that you said there. So firstly, when you've listened back to yourself, and I know you're reflecting and you're thinking about what you could improve on, but how do you actually use it and when do you listen?
So I have a little process, as you can probably imagine. So don't do it on the day. The day after is probably the starting point, but 2 days later is also good. Don't leave it too long because obviously then it becomes a thing. But within sort of 48 hours of you recording yourself, go back and listen to it. And there are two things that I do. I take the transcript of the recording and read it through, and then I'll listen to it through. So you've got two different mediums there. One is, this is what I say, and you can highlight certain things when you read through it and go, oh, okay, that's really interesting. And then you can hear the pitch and the tone and the way that you say things. And there are a couple of things that have happened for me. One, I realized how many times I say good or great within a session. That's great. And then I can go, actually, I don't want to be saying that. So what can I say that's different? And so then I have a practice. I notice how long I keep riders before I let them go. So I now have a little check and challenge for myself, which is, can I get them going within 60 seconds and then bring them back for the first, the second, and the third thing progressively rather than giving them 5 things? And those are the 2 things that I've learned, kind of, big things that I've learned. And then there's lots of other nuanced ones that will come out because they're personal to me. But yeah, within 48 hours, do the transcript and do the listening. Be your own best friend when you're doing that. This isn't about telling yourself off, or it's how you become the next version of yourself as a coach, rather than being critical and, oh my goodness, I should do this and I should do that. And as soon as you start shoulding, stop doing it and get someone else in to be your critical friend.
The process of reading and listening sounds fascinating, because I'm sure you notice different things. And you reminded me of something I did many years ago when I was coaching. And like you, felt maybe that I went on a bit too long when I had the group in listening to the next point or how we play the next part of the session. I'd give my watch to one of the children in the group and say, set the timer, 30 seconds. I'm not going to keep you here any longer. If I'm still talking at the end of 30 seconds, you can go and play. If I finished, we can go before, but you're in charge of the time. And it was really helpful for me because it made me become more concise. But then the kids felt empowered that they knew how long they were going to be there, but also they could say, right, your time's up, Tom. I can go and play now. But this whole process of reflecting, reviewing, and I think you said something really important there. Be really kind to yourself, because like this isn't about finding all the faults. This is about just learning and developing. And you don't have to share it with anyone else.
No, you don't. I have done that, and what I've shared with someone else. And again, it's the trust that you have in that person to allow that conversation to flow your way, rather than there being a predetermined, this is what I see from what I saw.
One final point just to dig into, because you said this, and I heard you say it last week on a call we were on together, around recording that voice note before the session. This is the first time I've heard of this. I've not come across it before. Why did you start doing this, and how's it helped?
So it came about probably because it's a little bit short on time, and I wanted to make sure that anyone I was coaching with kind of knew where I was coming from. And I would always write my session plan out and draw a little picture of what we were doing and maybe put some links to some resources and da-da-da-da. But then I thought, well, that's really bland. It just tells you the coaching points. It just tells you the place on the park. It doesn't actually evoke any sense of what I want to see. So I started recording it because I then wanted to go, how do I put this and make this quicker? So I can then throw it into AI. It can come out with the notes for me. I don't have to write it down. That was the speed thing. But what I noticed was doing that gave me a framework and I could send it out, but it didn't have any of the passion or energy of what I wanted the session to feel like. And if we go back to that voice choice and journey, if we are looking at riders, for me particularly riders, engaging and enjoying the session, I want the coaches that I'm working with to know where I'm coming from with that. And so I started sending it out and saying, right, actually, here's the plan, because obviously that's me. We might do that. But also here's like 3 minutes of me sharing what I think and how I want to see these riders reacting, the outcome that I want them to get to, and a little bit about how I think we could do that as a coaching team. And what I've really enjoyed is, as my fellow coaches kept coming back to me going, oh, I really like that, Nick. Thanks very much. I now see what you mean. So if I try to explain a session that I wanted to run this weekend on paper, it wouldn't have come across the way that I had explained it on my voice note. And they got it immediately. So if I wasn't there, they could have still done it because they knew exactly what it was I wanted these riders to experience. And it was a bit of that constraints approach that is hard to explain on paper, but easy to explain in words.
Thank you, Nicky. That makes lots of sense to me. And as I say, I've not heard that before. And I think there's something really inspirational and really interesting about it. I've rapidly been trying to make some notes as you've been talking to summarize 3 headlines that have really stood out to me in our conversation. The first one is around silence being golden, and recognizing the fact that maybe we reduce our ability to be effective as a coach if we spend all of our time jumping in. So being able to listen gives you lots of information that could help you make better coaching interventions and coaching decisions in the future. Part of our role as a coach is about filling the gap from where the people we're coaching are at today and where they'd like to be in the future. But that's done with small, achievable goals where we can offer lots of encouragement and help meeting the rider or the athlete where they're at. And the final piece, linking back to what you were just saying, that actually it could be really valuable as a coach to help the others that you work with show you're working. What are the intentions behind the way you've designed your session? What's the energy you want to be able to draw into the coaching? And actually a coaching session plan could be very one-dimensional if it's just words on a page. Nicky, thank you for being such a brilliant guest on the podcast today.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Tom. It's been lovely.
Thanks for listening to the Game Plan Coaching Podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, please follow the show and share it with a coach who might find it useful. I'd love to hear your feedback and any ideas for future guests. You can get in touch through the links in the show notes. Thanks again for listening, and go well in your next coaching session.